Ferrari now. 0345 6060 973. LBC.
Knock at the door.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10 minutes before 8, back to our conversation about that interview in a moment. Now, we touched briefly on this story earlier in the show, and it is running in the bulletins as well. New laws being brought in. Protesters who bring chaos to the streets will face tougher jail terms. Home Secretary Priti Patel and Justice Secretary Robert Buckland actually co-author a piece in today's Daily Mail, which is headlined, "The law should protect you and not the criminals." And one of the authors, Justice Secretary and Lord High Chancellor Robert Buckland, joins me now. OK, give us some of the details. I've read your piece, but for the benefit of my listeners who have not, Justice Secretary, what is it you and Priti Patel are spelling out today? Good morning to you.
Good morning, Nick. Well, in essence, a whole raft of reforms, particularly to support our police officers in their work to make sure that we get the balance right when it comes to public protest, to get the balance between freedom of expression and the huge inconvenience and worse, the disruption that it can cause to others. We're going to deal with sentencing reform on a whole range of serious offences. For example, serious violent and sexual offenders will stay in prison for longer. Child killers will now be presumed to get a whole life order under the sentencing provisions there. We're going to extend sexual offences and abuse of trust to cover sports coaches and faith leaders. We're going to also reform the way in which we deal with bail to end this rather lengthy process of release under investigation, and to, in effect, bring back more police bail in cases to try and make sure that we can get cases dealt with more quickly, and also maximum life sentence for causing death by dangerous driving, so a huge range of different measures.
One line that jumps out from your joint article, and I'll read it to you: new measures will make it easier for officers to stop and search. You'll be aware as much as anyone that is a fairly controversial police tactic, and that might be a controversial line. In what way easier, Justice Secretary?
Well, we know, sadly, that there are a number of people who, in effect, although they've been dealt with and convicted for possession or use of an offensive weapon, go back into that cycle of offending. And I think it's important to give police officers the power to search people where they've got information that that person's got a previous conviction for that sort of offence. And it's still very much based upon the need for police officers to use information and intelligence rather than, putting a metaphorical finger in the air. But it just gives them that extra discretion, if you like, in order to, I think, do that valuable work of public protection, because stop and search can save lives. And we're talking here about protecting particularly young people who sadly get caught up in a cycle of knife crime and who often end up dead as a result.
I've got to get your knife crime. You may be aware, Secretary of State, there's been another fatal stabbing in London overnight. We're at a very, very grim tally, possibly greater as a result of the pandemic. How confident are you that the London Mayor is doing all he can on this?
Well, look, I think the Metropolitan Police work extremely hard on this issue, and I know that they're working to, first of all, suppress the issue. But of course, suppressing it, keeping a lid on it, isn't the same as getting to the root cause of it. And we've still got a lot of work to be done on that issue. And I think it's not just about sentencing and protecting the public, important though that is. It's also about the diversion work that needs to be done. I'll give you an example. Only this week at Newham, we've opened a new hub to deal with young offenders older than 18, but between 18 and 25, to try and address some of the issues in their lives to get them out of that cycle of offending. Now, it seems to me that sort of targeted approach, working on young people, working on the reasons why they get into this appalling cycle, is a huge part of that work. And, I'm happy to work in partnership with the authority in London. But at the end of it all, this isn't just a London problem. With county lines, we've got it in every town and city in our country, and that's why the work that the police in stamping out county lines and also protecting young people who are often brought into this, who are victims themselves, I think is vital.
Let me ask you this, just on a couple of other matters. 6 former Home Secretaries sent a letter to one of the newspapers yesterday saying confidence in the police has been seriously damaged by Scotland Yard's investigation into false allegations of that paedophile ring Carl Beach, or Nick the Fantasist. There is pressure for an inquiry now from the Home Secretary. Would you support that pressure?
Well, I think that the questions that have been raised, not just by that letter, but indeed by the report of Sir Richard Henriques, the former High Court judge, are very significant. They do raise some very important issues that I think should be addressed. For me, it's not about individuals. It's about actually the system itself, and making sure that whilst it's vital that the victims of sexual abuse can come forward in confidence and be supported, I think the language of belief is something we need to be very careful about, because ultimately these are matters for the court or for a jury. I think it's right for the police to say, look, we're gathering evidence, the evidence is strong, we're continuing to gather it. I think that sort of approach is absolutely the right one. But I think what we saw with Midland was, I'm afraid, a departure from that sensible approach, and the results were all too painful, particularly for the family of the late Lord Britton and other victims.
So my question was, as High Chancellor and Justice Secretary, would you support the idea we need a fresh inquiry, Mr. Buckland?
Well, look, ultimately that's a matter I think that the Home Secretary would consider.
No, but I'm asking whether you support the 6 former Homes, 3 of whom are former Conservative colleagues of yours. Do you support them, yes or no?
I'll put it like this, Nick. I think the questions that they raise are very important ones, and the answers will be needed.
So an inquiry is needed, obviously. The only way we're going to get the answers is a full inquiry.
Well, I don't think it's right to prescribe a particular way that.
Well, how else are we going to get the answers, Justice Secretary?
But I think that the questions raised are really important ones.
Okay, finally, if if there has been racism within Buckingham Palace, do we need an investigation?
Well, Nick, I've not watched that interview.
Respectfully, you don't need to have known that story. I'd be staggered if you're not aware of this.
Well, I'm aware of it, of course, but I think that for me to add my four penneth to this would not be wise.
No. I'm not asking you to comment on family matters between the Queen and the Duchess and the Duke, but if there has been allegations of racism within Buckingham Palace, do they need to launch an inquiry? You are the Justice Secretary. Yeah,
but as you said, these are matters within the royal family, and I think they're matters best left to Buckingham Palace. I don't think it's right.
If it was another workplace, would you
them.
support an investigation into alleged racism such as that?
Well, look, I think that every family, place of work will have their own way of dealing with matters like this. I accept they're sensitive matters, but I don't think it's right of me to comment about them.
Grateful for your time. Thank you. Good luck with the legislation you're bringing about. Robert Buckland is Lord High Chancellor and Justice Secretary, appearing here on LBC. 2 minutes before 9 is the time. Let's come back to some of your reactions from what you got from the interview yesterday. Pam in Paynton, you're on the radio. Pam, what are you going to say? Good morning.
Yeah, morning, Nick. I watched it last night. Very, very disappointed, to be honest with you, in Harry. I think a lot of conversations took place in private, which they shouldn't really be aired. Secondly,
why shouldn't they be aired, Pam? Why shouldn't they be aired?
Well, I think that the conversation took place, to be honest with you, and I'm not saying it is him, but with one of his close relatives, was probably when he first got together with her. And conversations would have gone on, as with William, when he said to him, now look, you've only known her